Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 7 true disturbing stories about Angeles National Forest. Every story will leave you questioning what's really out there. But before we begin, please consider subscribing. Don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends and family. I'd also love to hear where you're listening from. Thank you all for your support. It means a lot to me. Now let's start. I'd been working seasonal gigs with a conservation crew. That summer, I got sent way out into Angeles National Forest, far past where the weekend hikers and Instagram types even bother going. It was steep, dry, and quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't give anything back when you talk. Closest sign of life was a rundown gas station, almost an hour's drive down a dirt road that liked to wash out every time it rained. Our base was this old fire monitoring post, basically a squat concrete bunker with a half-collapsed radio tower and a line of bunk rooms that smelled like dust and plywood. No signal, no internet, no service. Just us and a rack of old hand tools hanging by the door. It had a diesel generator that rattled all night like it was trying to shake itself loose from the earth. There were 3 of us assigned that rotation. Cody, who was from Eureka and spent most of his time rolling cigarettes he never actually lit. Ben, who talked like he was trying out for a podcast even when no one responded. And me. Reed was our lead. Mid-30s, thin but wiry, sharp jaw, and eyes that seemed like they were always calculating the sun's position even when it was dark. He didn't speak much, and when he did, it was short and final, like punctuation. By the second week, the heat had us beat. Mid-July, dry as sandpaper. The shed thermometer kept climbing until one day it just blinked out and never came back. The brush was bone dry. Even the flies were too tired to move. We kept plugging along, but Reed could tell we were close to collapse. That afternoon, just after lunch, he looked around at the 3 of us like we were meat left too long in the sun and said, "Screw this. You want to see something better than sweat and chaparral?" Cody waved him off without opening his eyes. Ben was already half asleep on a cot under the awning. I stood up and grabbed my canteen. Reed took the UTV and tossed me a backup bottle. We bumped along a half-cleared trail that hadn't been used in years, probably only passable because we'd been through earlier in the season. After about 20 minutes, he pulled off and pointed to a narrow canyon running down between 2 cliffs. Half hour in, cold spring, nobody ever finds it, let's go. We started down. The shade helped a little, sycamores and old oak twisting overhead, but the trail was still uneven and sharp in places. Reed moved like he'd done this a dozen times, barely looked where he was going. Then, about 10 minutes in, he slowed, stopped, not because he was tired, but like something had changed. I stopped too, but he didn't say anything, just stared off to the left, beyond this small rock shelf, and asked, almost casually, "You see that?" I squinted. Through the trees, there was this patch of blue. At first, I figured it was some hiker's tarp, but it didn't ripple, didn't move at all. The edges were wrong. Too clean, too sharp. It looked solid. We moved off trail to check it out. It was a shipping container, just sitting there, bright blue, full size, clean, no dents, no tags, no graffiti, no tire tracks. Just nestled there in a clearing like some giant kid left it behind after a game. The thing was pristine, like it hadn't been touched by weather or time. It didn't make any sense. Reed stared at it like he was trying to rewind his own memory. "That wasn't here last time." And I knew he wasn't guessing. He remembered everything. He'd once pointed out a new gopher hole along a trail we hadn't walked in days. We walked a slow circle around it. That's when I heard the low hum. Behind the container, hidden by some brush, was a diesel generator. Big one. Humming steady, not choking or sputtering like it was struggling. It had been running for days, maybe longer, and on each top corner of the container, cameras, motion sensors, the kind that rotate when you move. They ticked and clicked, following us as we walked. That's when I felt it. Not fear exactly, more like exposure. like we'd walked into the middle of something we shouldn't have seen. I told Reed, let's just leave right now. This isn't ours, but he wasn't hearing it. He looked at me, shook his head. It's not anyone's. This is federal land. And then, just like that, he walked back to the UTV and grabbed bolt cutters. No debate, no hesitation, 3 squeezes, and the lock clattered to the dirt. Cold air spilled out the moment he opened the door. Not just cooler, like powered air, climate controlled. It hit us like a wall. Inside, it was full of server racks, floor to ceiling machines, rows of blinking lights. The space was narrow, but organized. Everything labeled, wired, stacked, clean, dust-free. It felt awake. Reed stepped in like it was any other maintenance shed, sat at the nearest desk and tapped a keyboard. Monitors came alive. Dozens of windows were already open. File trees, transfer logs, folder names I couldn't make sense of, long strings of numbers and symbols, some kind of data collection, constantly updating. I didn't go in. I didn't want to. My whole body felt wrong. Numb hands, teeth buzzing, like standing too close to a high-voltage fence. I moved to the bag and opened one of the gray plastic bins stacked against the wall. Inside were files, paper ones, photos, DVDs in clear sleeves. Everything perfectly organized. And I saw kids. Some were smiling, school portraits. Some looked like they didn't know they were being photographed. Some were pulled from video, blurred motion, captured frames, and handwritten notes. Ages, locations, names, sometimes just dates. I slammed the lid shut. I didn't pause. I didn't explain. I walked back to Reed and said flat out, "We're leaving now." He looked up, surprised, and I said it again, louder this time. "It's not just data. It's something bad." He stood. No argument. We got in the UTV and drove fast, way faster than was smart for that trail. Back at the station, we radioed the Forest Service. Didn't give them much, just said we found unauthorized equipment might be dangerous. They told us to stay put. 3 hours later, 2 black Suburbans rolled up the dirt road. 4 guys got out, suits, clean, no badges, no names. They didn't ask us much, just told us to take them there. But when we got back, the container was already burning. The door was open, flames curling out from the floor. No sound except the crackle of plastic and wires going up. It was a clean burn, like it had been lit from the inside. Reed ran to grab an extinguisher. One of the agents did too. I didn't even try. It was already too late. The heat coming off it was intense, controlled, but thorough. They put it out eventually, or at least what was left. By then, the inside was melted slag. The agents didn't say much, took samples, scanned with a handheld device, took notes, told us we'd done the right thing. That was all. Forest Service called it a security incident. We gave statements, twice. Then, silence. Couple weeks later, I asked Reed if he ever heard back. They cleaned it out, he said. Gone by morning. We went up to check, and it was true. No container, no scorch marks, no debris. The ground looked untouched, like it had never happened, like someone had scrubbed the forest itself. I checked online for months, but nothing. It was early September, right after Labor Day weekend. School had just started and our daughter had made it through her first week of kindergarten. I remember thinking she looked smaller somehow in that big classroom, carrying her backpack like it weighed more than she did. She was holding it together, but I could tell the transition had taken a lot out of her, out of all of us, honestly. So I suggested we go camping, just the 3 of us, a short trip, nothing fancy. I thought it would help her relax after the big change, and it would give us a few quiet days before we got pulled fully back into the routine of work, school, drop-offs, lunches, and permission slips. We decided on 3 nights, just long enough to disconnect and take a breath. My husband had recently signed up to volunteer with the Forest Service, light trail work, mostly cleanup. And it turned out they were doing a maintenance sweep that same week in Angeles National Forest. He'd be out with a crew each morning for a couple of hours, nothing too strenuous. That left the rest of the day wide open for me and our daughter to do whatever we wanted. We picked a campground that was small and tucked away, without all the usual noise. No RV hookups, no picnic shelters, no running water even. Just a spigot near the entrance and pit toilets down a side path. I liked that. I wanted quiet. Real quiet. Not just no music after 10 quiet. Somewhere with pine trees that actually blocked out the sky a little. Somewhere we wouldn't hear other people laughing late into the night. The kind of place where you can hear your own thoughts, whether you want to or not. We had one car between us. Every morning, we'd all wake up early, still wrapped in fleece and half asleep, and drive down to the visitor center, where my husband would meet up with the crew and catch a ride out. Then my daughter and I would head back to camp, boil water for oatmeal, and make a slow morning of it. She'd play with sticks or draw shapes in the dust with her fingers while I straightened up. It became a little routine in those few days. Simple, predictable, in a good way. That third morning started exactly the same. I remember she was humming something under her breath in the back seat. Something tuneless, the kind of sound kids make when their brains are still waking up, but they feel safe enough to be silly. We stopped at the ranger station to fill our jugs, then made the familiar winding drive back to the campsite. She hopped out of the car barefoot and went right back to her castle, a small structure she'd been building out of smooth stones and pine cones near the base of a tree. She was serious about it, like it was her job or something. I told her to put her shoes on. She didn't. I started doing what I always did, cleaning up. The camp stove still had crumbs from the night before. A couple of forks needed wiping. The picnic table was gritty. I figured if I stayed ahead of the mess, packing up the next morning wouldn't be such a disaster. I even started folding the clothes bag, trying to figure out if we could maybe leave earlier than planned. Then I ducked into the tent. I wasn't looking for anything, just meant to grab a sweater and double-check that our stuff hadn't shifted too much overnight. But when I leaned over my daughter's sleeping bag, I noticed the zipper on that side of the tent was open. Not all the way, just a few inches, like someone had unzipped it halfway and then stopped. It didn't look like something a kid would do. It looked hesitant, precise. I felt this small spike of irritation. Dust gets in through those gaps, so do bugs. My daughter's the kind of kid who leaves things unzipped, so I didn't think much of it at first. I leaned forward to close it, then noticed something odd stuffed into the mesh side pocket next to her bag. In a cigarette pack. It was one of those soft packs, creased and partially crushed, like it had been shoved in quickly. Green and white, Newports. I froze for a second, squatting there in the tent, holding it in my hand. Neither of us smoked those. My husband and I both roll our own. Cheaper, less trash. I hadn't seen a Newport pack since I was 17 and bumming smokes behind the gym. It looked out of place. Too out of place. I stared at it for another few seconds, then stepped out of the tent. My hands were colder than they'd been a minute ago. "Sweetie?" I called, keeping my voice light. "Did you go in the tent this morning?" She looked up from her pile of rocks, blinking into the sunlight. "No, you sure?" She nodded. "Are we going to Daddy's?" "Yes," I said. "Right now. Go get your shoes." I didn't explain. I didn't even grab the day bag. I just zipped the tent, locked the car, and got us inside. She didn't resist. She was still in that 5-year-old headspace where if your mom says it's time to go, you just go. I didn't tell her what I'd found. I didn't even fully let myself think about it yet. We drove straight to the visitor center. My husband was chatting near the ranger truck, holding a styrofoam cup of coffee. I waved him over, and when he saw my face, he handed the cup off and jogged toward the car. "I found something," I said quietly, "in the tent." He didn't ask what. He didn't need to. 10 minutes later, we were back at the campsite. He pulled in slow, parked farther from the tent than usual. Then he reached across the seat, opened the glove box, and took out the flashlight we usually only use for night hikes. "I'm staying in the car," I said. I didn't mean it as a question. He nodded once and stepped out. He unzipped the tent and ducked inside. I watched his boots disappear under the nylon. Time stretched weird after that. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, not even realizing how tightly, until my knuckles started to ache. I watched the tree line, every branch, every shadow. The tent sat still like nothing had ever touched it. When he came back out, he walked straight to the driver's side window. "There's a boot print next to her bag," he said, voice low, deeper than mine. I blinked at him. "What? Fresh print," he said. Someone was standing there. That's when my brain just stalled. I stared at him like I'd forgotten how language worked. He didn't try to explain, just turned and started walking a slow circle around the site, scanning the trees with a flashlight. Even though it was full daylight, we called the ranger. He got there about 40 minutes later, mud on the tires, radio crackling, the whole deal. He took it seriously but didn't make a big show of it. Asked us questions, looked around, took notes in a spiral-bound notebook that looked way too small for what we were telling him. We showed him the print, the cigarettes, the zipper. He nodded a lot. Bagged the cigarette pack. Said he'd make some rounds and check for anyone matching that shoe size. But there weren't many people in that area that week. Not enough to go on. We didn't push it, we just left. That night we stayed at my sister's place in Pasadena. My daughter fell asleep instantly on the air mattress beside me. I didn't. Every time she rolled over, I jolted awake, my ears straining for a sound I wouldn't be able to explain. The next morning, my husband and his brother went back to break down the campsite. He didn't want me there. Said it made him uncomfortable to think about me walking back into that tent. They climbed the ridge behind our site. It was steep and overgrown. No path, just loose soil and dense brush. But from up there you could see everything. The entire site, every angle. You could tell who was coming, who was going, which zipper was open and for how long. They didn't find anything. No gear, no footprints, no food wrappers or cigarette butts, nothing. But someone had been there. Someone stood inside our tent, next to our daughter's sleeping bag. We changed after that. I carry the car keys now, always. We replaced our tent with one that has interior locks and double zippers. We don't camp in remote sites anymore unless we know other people are nearby. I bought motion lights, the kind that run off solar panels and glow all night, just in case. Our dog sleeps closer now. I put a whistle in my daughter's school bag. We never told her the full story. She still thinks we left early because the weather was changing. I'm 34 years old. When my brother called me about clearing out our uncle's place up in the Angeles National Forest, I thought it'd be nothing more than a weekend of lifting boxes, arguing about what counted as trash, and maybe finally getting around to a real conversation we'd been avoiding for years. Uncle Tom's place wasn't just remote. It was buried halfway up Mount Gleason, past where the paved road ends and the gravel one pretends to still be a road. Trees crowd in so tight on both sides, it starts to feel like you're driving into a tunnel. No reception, no houses, no ranger stations. Nothing but endless forest and the occasional deer that stares you down like you're the one trespassing. Tom had lived up there since the late 80s, kind of a half survivalist, half I just don't like people kind of guy. Even when I was a kid, I remember my family calling him off. I went up there once, when I was 12, and even then, I couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't scary, exactly, but something about the quiet stuck with me. Not peaceful, just unnatural. Like everything around you was waiting. After he died, no one touched the place for over 2 years. He didn't leave behind much. No will, no surviving spouse, no real instructions. Just the property deed and a cabin slowly being swallowed by the forest. My brother Ben ended up taking point, found some buyer who was convinced they could flip it into a rustic rental. We had 1 weekend to get in, salvage what we could, and toss the rest. We drove up Friday morning, late enough that the sun had warmed up the air, but not enough to make the drive comfortable. The last mile was especially rough, just rocks, potholes, and that weird feeling that the mountain wasn't thrilled we'd come back. The cabin was still standing, but it looked tired. Ivy had climbed up 2 sides of the walls. The roof sagged under the weight of leaves and old branches, and the back deck had half collapsed where the hillside had washed out underneath. It looked less like a home and more like a forgotten artifact. Ben tried the front door. The key worked, but the door didn't want to move. He had to put his shoulder into it. When it finally opened, it made this long groaning sound, like something exhaling. Inside, the place smelled like old wood, damp insulation, and rodent leftovers. Dust hung in the air like it hadn't been disturbed in years. We opened the windows, not that it helped much. Ben headed down the hallway to the back rooms while I started in the kitchen. It was full of junk. Rusted can openers, expired canned peaches, jars filled with things I didn't recognize and didn't want to. I was halfway through boxing up cookware when I realized I hadn't heard Ben in a while. No footsteps, no dragging sounds, nothing. Then he called out, not yelling, just sharp enough that I could tell it wasn't casual. "Hey, you should come look at this." He was in the closet of the back bedroom, the one that had always been locked when we were kids. He'd pulled up a corner of the old rug and found this plywood panel underneath. It didn't match the floorboards, looked newer, cheaper, maybe something he'd added himself. He'd already pried it open by the time I got there. Underneath was a staircase, steep, hand-built, narrow enough that we'd have to go down sideways. No railing, no light. Just raw wood steps, fading into dark. "There's no basement," I said, more to myself than him. He just nodded. "Exactly." Then he started down like he wasn't even curious, just certain. I hesitated. Every step creaked, and the deeper we went, the weirder the air felt. Like it was thicker, harder to breathe, not in a choking way, more like the oxygen wasn't quite right. By the time we reached the bottom, I already had a pit in my stomach. The space down there didn't belong. It was too big, too finished. Poured concrete walls, no insulation, no drywall, just gray concrete and the faint smell of rust. On the far wall, shelves packed with old VHS tapes, stacked in groups and labeled with dates, sometimes 2 or 3 per day. Beside them was a long table covered in notebooks, all the same kind, spiral-bound, soft cover. And then to the right, an entire wall of Polaroid, carefully arranged, perfectly aligned, hundreds of them. Every photo showed the same 3 trees, same angle, same framing, always just slightly off-center on a slope, and always with something standing between them. Sometimes it was clearly a person, some in coats or hats, sometimes with faces obscured, other times not. One photo had what looked like a human outline, but it was crouched too low, its arms too long, fingers nearly touching the ground. Another had something almost entirely hidden by shadow, just a faint silhouette where no one should have been. And some of the empty ones were worse, because after a while, you started noticing the wrong shadows. Or a pair of legs that didn't have a torso. Ben was flipping through the notebooks like he'd seen this kind of thing before. "These are logs," he said. "Each one lines up with a tape. Same time, 2 to 3 p.m. every day, same location. How far back does it go?" He didn't answer right away, just kept turning pages. "First one's 1986, he said. Last one's from last year." I froze. "Tom died in 2022. Ben stared at the last page. His face changed. "Then who filmed the last one?" That's when we heard the click. Soft, familiar, mechanical. A camcorder, one of those old shoulder mount ones, was set up on a tripod in the corner, pointed straight at the door. This red recording light was on. Neither of us had touched it. We stared at it, then at each other. No words, just instant panic. Ben ran first. I followed, but as I reached the bottom step, the door slammed shut, hard. I ran into it full force. No knob on my side, no visible lock. Just cold, flat wood. I yelled, pounded, nothing. My phone was upstairs. Then I heard it, a dragging sound behind the shelves. I didn't move. There shouldn't have been space back there, just concrete. But something shifted. I pressed my ear close. Nothing at first. Then a faint shuffling, like someone brushing against fabric or sliding their hand across stone. I stepped back. That's when I noticed the hole, small, drilled straight through the concrete, down low, just big enough to see something shift on the other side. The camcorder's red light blinked again. Still recording, I sat in the farthest corner of the room and didn't move. My watch had stopped ticking, or maybe I'd just lost track. The light from the vent slit didn't shift. It felt like time wasn't happening. Then footsteps, above me, slow, deliberate, not Ben's. The door creaked open. It was a woman, probably mid-40s, wearing a blue parka, boots caked in red dust. She looked like she'd walked out of a different story entirely. Her eyes weren't on me. She was staring past me into the room, like it was something she'd imagined but hadn't believed until now. "You saw them too," she said. I didn't ask what she meant. I just ran. I kept running until I hit the fire road, found a ranger truck, told him I'd gotten lost hiking. He nodded like he'd heard it before and drove me to a station where I called a friend to come get me. I'm 19 years old. People always point out how small I am. 5'5" on a good day, maybe 110 pounds if I've just eaten and kept it down. It's not mean-spirited, usually, just the usual comments. You look like you'd get knocked over by a strong breeze. But out there, in the middle of Angeles National Forest with just a cart and a box cutter, those words stuck in my head more than usual. Out there, it mattered. I was volunteering with a backcountry trail program, conservation work mostly, manual labor, no glamour. I'd been out there about 3 months. Everyone else got the intense tasks, clearing brush, cutting fire lines, heavy hauling. I ended up on surface sanitation. That's their nice way of saying trash duty. I hauled junk down from broken sheds, cleared debris off trails, and dragged carts full of rusted metal, soggy cardboard, and tools no one had touched in years. It was quiet work, solo work. They figured I was quick, low maintenance, and probably less likely to complain. And they were right. The path I used most led to this place we called the drop zone, a clearing where we left sorted junk to be picked up later. It sat about half a mile downhill from base camp, just past a long, skinny trail that dipped between 2 ridgelines and cut through thick scrub and pine. The trail passed a building, an old ranger station, decommissioned, supposedly empty. You could walk right past it without even noticing unless you knew where to look. The roof slouched to one side. Most of the front was hidden behind gnarled branches and dry overgrowth. At first, I barely glanced at it. Just another forgotten building, one of dozens in the area. But after a few days of passing it alone, something started getting under my skin. Nothing obvious, just this quiet, crawling tension, the kind you only notice when your feet start moving faster and you can't figure out why. I wasn't scared exactly, not yet, just aware. Like I wasn't the only one listening to my footsteps on that trail. Then one afternoon, it shifted. I glanced over at the ranger station without really meaning to, and saw him. In the bay window, set behind thick, faded glass, there was a man standing there, too tall for that room. His neck was bent forward slightly, like the ceiling forced him to slouch. He was thin, almost sharp around the edges. Every part of him looked stretched the wrong way. His hair was a messy clump of gray, wild and knotted. He wore a white tank top that had probably started as clothing, but had disintegrated into damp patches and loose threads. It clung to him like it was part of his skin. He didn't flinch when I saw him, didn't step away, just stood completely still, staring out the window at me. No change in expression, no surprise, like he'd already known I was going to be there. I gave this tight little smile, instinct, nothing real behind it. I wasn't even sure if he could see it through the glare, but he didn't move. He just stepped back into the shadows of the room, keeping his eyes on me until the last possible second. Then his face disappeared into the dark. I didn't report it. I don't know why. Maybe because I couldn't put it into words without sounding paranoid. What was I supposed to say? There's a guy in a condemned building and he looked at me weird? Even in my own head, it sounded thin. So instead, I changed the way I walked that trail. I picked up my pace, stopped glancing at the window. I started timing myself, how fast I could get from camp to the drop zone and back without lingering anywhere near the station. But none of it worked. The image of him stayed with me. How he fit inside that house, like he wasn't really standing in it, more like he'd been absorbed by it, pressed into the wood and glass. I didn't see him again for about a week. No face in the window, no movement. I started wondering if he'd left, or if I'd somehow made more of it than I should have. Then came Tuesday. It was already hotter than usual by morning. I'd grabbed a loose navy dress that I kept stuffed in my bag for laundry days. Didn't expect to be on cart duty again. When my supervisor pointed me toward the trail list, I just nodded. I didn't even argue. I slid the box cutter into the side pocket like I always did. The trail felt different that day. No wind, no birds. Just heat pressing against my back and the sound of the wheels behind me. The kind of stillness that makes everything else louder. When I rounded the bend and the station came into view, I stopped without meaning to. He was outside this time, standing just behind the chain-link fence around what used to be the station's utility yard. He didn't move, just watched, and with him, two huge cane corsos, trapped in rusted cages. I had never seen them before. Don't know how I missed them. Maybe they hadn't been there. He walked over to the cages and opened them, slowly, calmly. One latch, then the other. The dogs exploded forward. They slammed into the fence with so much force it rattled like it might give out. They weren't barking like they were defending anything. It sounded more like excitement, like they were waiting for someone to make a mistake. I didn't wait. I kept my eyes down and pushed the cart as fast as I could. My hands were shaking on the handle. I didn't stop until I hit the drop zone and dumped the first load of cardboard. Even then, I kept checking the trail behind me, listening. The dogs were still barking, but the man was gone. The silence afterward was worse than the barking, like the forest itself had sucked all the sound out of the air. Then I heard something. Branches snapping, underfoot, closer than they should have been. I turned. He was walking toward me from the slope, 10, maybe 12 feet away. That same bent posture. His left arm swung weirdly behind him, like it wasn't connected properly. His right hand was buried deep in his hoodie pocket. He moved like someone trying to match the rhythm of something only he could hear. Slow, precise, rehearsed. I don't remember grabbing the box cutter. I just remember my fingers around it, my palms slippery, my chest too tight to move air. Then someone called out, "Is that your cart?" Normal voice, friendly tone, like we were in a parking lot, not a clearing at the edge of nowhere. I turned so fast I almost fell. One of the guys from camp, tall, kind of awkward, always wore these old boots that squeak when he walked. He was holding a trash bag, climbing the trail like he was late for a snack. "Yeah," I said, barely getting it out. He didn't slow down, just walked up beside me, brushed his hand against my shoulder and leaned in a little. "Come with me," he whispered, calm, steady. Then he took the cart handle and started pushing it back uphill. I followed. I didn't say a word. Didn't ask questions. I just kept glancing back until we were around the next bend. That's when I saw him, the man from the station, running. Not walking, not pacing, sprinting back toward the utility yard. Fast, uncoordinated, frantic. He shoved something into his waistband. Metal. Could have been a blade or a tool. I couldn't tell. His eyes followed the guy beside me with this pure, raw look. Not fear, not panic. Just pure hatred. Unfiltered. Animal. We reached a flatter stretch and stopped. "I saw him coming toward you," the guy said. Didn't like the way he moved. Figured if I kept things normal, maybe he'd back off. He wasn't trying to act like a hero. He didn't puff up or try to make it dramatic. He just stood there, making sure I wouldn't have to go back down alone. "Don't go near that place again," he said. "If no one's around, grab me." I nodded. That was it. He headed back to camp like nothing happened. I stayed there for a few more minutes, gripping the cart, the box cutter, the air in my lungs like they were all the same thing. Like letting go of any of them would mean falling apart. After that, I never walked that trail alone again. I never touched another assignment that took me past the ranger station. My cousin bailed the morning we were supposed to head into Deadwood National Forest for the long weekend. Said he had a last-minute shift. I didn't believe him. He just didn't want to be stuck in a tent with the kid who couldn't hide how messed up home life was. I could hear it in his voice when he said, "Maybe next time," all flat like he was already gone. So I went by myself. I packed everything I needed: tent, canned food, diabetes gear, my solar charger, that emergency radio my mom gave me when I was 13. It made the cut, even though I'd never cranked it once. The goal wasn't to go camping, not really. I wanted to be nowhere, somewhere off-grid, where I didn't have to be a version of myself for anyone else, just a dot on a map nobody was checking. My phone dropped service about halfway up the forest road, but if I held it at a weird angle near the dashboard, Snapchat would still crawl to life. That's when I saw the notification. Some guy added me from QuickAdd. His name was just a first name I didn't recognize, no last name. His profile picture was dim and grainy, taken in a dark car with just enough light to make out a face. He looked older, mid-20s maybe, confident, not cocky, just like someone who didn't doubt himself. I accepted the request. Loneliness makes you do dumb things. He messaged within minutes, said he lived near the north end of the forest, not far from where I was camped. He asked if I liked it quiet, said he usually avoided trails that drew crowds. "You know," he typed, "the kind of places where you can really disappear." That should have been a red flag. It wasn't. We talked until after midnight. Then again the next night. His name was Chris, or that's what he said. 24 years old, grew up around there, knew all the terrain, every trail and offshoot. When I told him where I'd pitched my tent, he said that area was sketchy. He didn't come right out and say danger, but he mentioned disappearances. Not enough people around, he wrote. Nobody sees anything. He made it sound like he was doing me a favor. So yeah, I packed up the next morning, folded my tent, stuffed my gear into the hatch, and drove to the spot he told me about. A stone slab near the trailhead at Harper Ridge. You had to park by an old forest sign and hike a bit to find it. He was already there when I arrived, sitting like a statue. "Thought you changed your mind," he said. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes I didn't know how to read. We hiked for over an hour, not on a trail, through undergrowth thick enough to slow us down every few steps. At some point, I asked him where exactly we were going. "Cabin," he said. "Friend's place. It's off an old fire road. Nobody around for miles. You'll like it." When we got there, I realized he'd stretched the word cabin beyond its limits. It was a shack, the kind of place you'd expect to find on the edge of a horror movie set. Boarded windows, flaking paint, rusted locks that didn't lock anything anymore. No power, no plumbing, just a sagging mattress in the corner and a single battery lantern swinging from a nail like a sad chandelier. Chris didn't seem to notice how awful it was. He was calm, like he did this every weekend. That first night was quiet. I didn't sleep much, but not because anything weird happened. I was still wired from the hike, still trying to convince myself this was a break, not a mistake. It got weirder on the second night. He got snappy when I reached for my phone. I just wanted to check the time. He took it from me. Said people who came to the forest for silence shouldn't be staring at screens. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. He dropped it into his pack and said, "I'll keep it safe. It's easy to lose things out here." I should have left then. Next morning, we crossed paths with two hikers heading up the ridge. I said hello. Chris didn't even look at them, just stared until they passed. One of them glanced back at me. Not for long, just enough to make my stomach twist. We stayed another night, then another. Every time I brought up heading back to the road, he acted like I was insulting him. "You said you wanted to get away," he'd say. "You don't really mean that, huh?" At some point, he stopped asking. He just expected me to stay. He started rationing our food and water, made jokes about how soft people had gotten. "You could use some time off the grid," he said. "You'll thank me later." My insulin was running low. I told him, "You're not gonna die," he said, waving it off. "It's just discomfort." 3 days before Thanksgiving, he shook me awake before sunrise. "We have to move," he said. "Rangers came by the shack. They're asking about squatters." We didn't talk while we hiked. No trails this time, just scrambling through brush. At one point, I stopped asking where we were going. He wasn't answering anyway. In the late afternoon, a guy stepped out of the woods like he'd been waiting for us. Chris introduced him as Leo. "He's one of us," Chris said. I didn't ask what that meant. Leo had a machete strapped to his leg, didn't smile, barely spoke. Chris handed me a canvas bag, told me to go with Leo to grab supplies from a drop point. The clearing was strange. Crates stacked under a camo tarp, like a survivalist's Christmas. Leo barely acknowledged me. Out there, away from Chris, I pulled out the burner phone I'd hidden in my boot. One bar, one message from Chris. "You're being shady. What the hell are you doing?" My hands went cold. I took a selfie. Me and Leo by the tarp. Sent it. "Just getting food, like you said." When we got back, Chris was pacing like he'd been doing it for hours. I handed him the bag. He didn't even glance inside. "What'd you say to him?" he asked. "Nothing." He turned to Leo. "She tell you anything?" Leo barely looked up. She was quiet. Chris didn't believe him, or me. He kept pressing, voice rising, accusing me of lying, of going through his pack, of planning something. Finally, Leo said, "Handle your own drama," and vanished back into the trees. Now it was just us. He pushed me back into the shack, slammed the door behind us. "You went through my stuff," he said. "I didn't," I said. My voice sounded too small in that space. He didn't care. He just paced and muttered, accusing me of things I hadn't done. Eventually he went outside, maybe to calm down. I didn't wait. I grabbed my insulin, the burner phone, and my flashlight. I ran. Branches scraped my arms. I didn't care. My legs burned, but I didn't stop. I didn't even know which way was north. At some point, I hit a root and went down hard. My knee cracked against something, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. But I got up, kept moving. I didn't care if I got lost. I just had to get away. I found an old fire road, broken signs, faded lettering. I crawled under a rocky ledge and cried until there was nothing left in my throat. A little after midnight, I saw a flashlight bouncing through the trees. I froze. It wasn't Chris. It was another guy. I recognized him vaguely. Maybe from the shack, maybe not. He said he saw my light, said he came to help. I followed. I didn't have much choice. He didn't take me to the road. He took me to another camp. More people. Tarps stretched between trees. No one said much. One woman took my insulin and said she'd keep it safe. I stayed there 2 days. They didn't let me leave. On the third night, someone muttered, "Your people were called." I didn't believe them, but at dusk, headlights cut through the trees. A black SUV pulled up. My mom stepped out. She looked exhausted, wrecked, but solid. She didn't say anything at first, just walked up to me and said, "We're leaving now." Someone shoved a duffel into her arms and said, "She's not welcome back." We didn't talk on the drive, not until we reached a gas station outside town. I didn't go home. I stayed with a friend near Norcliffe. I couldn't sleep. I kept checking the windows. Every creak sounded like footsteps. A few weeks later, I found out Chris had turned himself in. His real name wasn't Chris. He had open warrants. He was tied to a missing girl from 2 years ago. She never came back. We were hiking up near Fox Hollow. Me, my Uncle Brian, and his 2 sons, Leo and Marcus, who were both way older than me, like 15 or 16. It wasn't meant to be some big survival expedition, just a couple of miles up a forest loop outside Emerson Ridge. A few turns, some decent elevation, but nothing extreme. They'd gotten into this routine, these weekend hikes, ever since spring hit. I'd heard about them every Monday from my cousins. And every week I'd ask to come along, and every week I'd get some version of next time or when you're a bit older. Then one Saturday in late June, Uncle Brian finally said yes. Looking back, I think he thought it'd be good for me, that maybe if I scraped my knee or got blisters, I'd stop asking. But more than that, he probably figured it would help me learn how to keep up, to stop zoning out so much, because I did that more than most kids. I'd space out without realizing it, especially if something small grabbed my attention, a bug crawling across a rock, a weird-shaped leaf, stuff no one else would notice. I didn't mean to fall behind. I just didn't notice I had until it was too late. Mom usually kept me glued to her side on trips like that. One hand on my shoulder if we were walking near cliffs, constant reminders not to wander. But she wasn't there this time, just Uncle Brian, who figured I'd copy the boys and fall into line. I did for a while. The beginning of the trail was easy. I had to jog now and then to keep up, but it wasn't bad. Leo and Marcus were being loud, daring each other to balance on logs or throw pine cones at dead stumps. They didn't seem to mind that I trailed behind. Uncle Brian kept glancing back every few minutes just to make sure I was still there. He said we were heading to a lookout point. If we made it before sundown, the view would be worth it. I wasn't really interested in the view. I just liked being included. We had been walking for maybe an hour when I saw it. There was this old wooden sign at a fork in the trail. It looked half buried in weeds and leaned like it had been stuck into the ground by someone who gave up halfway through. One of the posts had a carving burned into it. A bird, I think. An owl, maybe. Its eyes were just black circles. The whole thing looked older than everything else around it, like it didn't belong to the same trail system. There weren't any markings or trail numbers, nothing official, just the bird. The left fork looked normal, wider, with trampled grass and a few snack wrappers stuck between rocks. The right fork was different, narrow, overgrown. It didn't even look like a real path at first. No footprints, no crushed grass. Just dirt under low branches, and it was quiet over there. Not just woods quiet, but like the air didn't carry sound the same way. It felt like if I stepped past that fork, the forest wouldn't echo anymore. So of course, I stepped over. I only meant to look. That's what I told myself. Just get close enough to check out the carving on the post and maybe take a few steps down the hidden path. It couldn't have been more than a minute, but when I turned around, everyone was gone. No voices, no movement up ahead, no sound of Leo laughing or Marcus arguing, no sight of Uncle Brian glancing over his shoulder. I should have seen them. It was a single trail, and we weren't moving that fast. I didn't panic right away. I yelled, waited, yelled again. I even laughed a little, like maybe they were messing with me, hiding behind a tree or something. Nothing. I spun around in a full circle. The fork was gone. The weird post, gone. It was just trees now, and dirt and underbrush. Every direction looked the same, like someone had swapped the scenery out while I blinked. I picked what I thought was the way we'd come, but the ground didn't feel right. It sloped in ways I didn't remember. The rocks under my feet were wrong shapes. A part of me started to worry that maybe I'd just forgotten, but the bigger part, the part that made my hands start to shake, knew I had. Eventually, I just sat down on a flat rock and stopped moving. I wasn't tired, exactly, but my legs felt like jelly, and my chest felt full, like I couldn't breathe deep enough. I kept telling myself they were probably just around a bend. They'd notice I wasn't behind them. They'd turn back. But minutes kept passing. The shadows got longer, and I started to feel cold, even though it was still warm out. Not cold like temperature, cold like I shouldn't be there anymore. I started crying, not sobbing, just those tight, stuttering breaths that come with trying not to cry too loud. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my hoodie. I remember it was damp afterward, and I felt weirdly embarrassed about it. like I was going to get in trouble for being messy. Then I heard something above me. Footsteps, crunching leaves. A man appeared coming down the hill like he'd been walking the trail the whole time. He looked like a regular hiker. Late 40s, maybe older, average build, gray hoodie, faded cargo pants. His boots were caked with dried mud, like he'd been out here for a while. He had sunglasses on, which was weird, because the sun was behind the trees by then and the trail was mostly shade. But he didn't seem threatening. He stopped a few feet away. "You all right, kid?" I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at him. He didn't look dangerous. He didn't look like anything, really. Just a guy. I told him I'd gotten separated from my family. I didn't explain how. I didn't want to get in trouble. He nodded. "I saw a guy with 2 boys not long ago. They looked pretty worried. Asked me to keep an eye out for a kid in a green backpack and a Dodgers hat." I glanced down at myself, like my own outfit would betray me. Green backpack, Dodgers hat. It matched. He pointed behind him. "They're back that way. Still a hike, but my truck's up the service road. If we drive, we'll beat them to the main lot." Then he held out his hand. I didn't take it. I said, "I'm not supposed to go with strangers." He smiled at that, like I'd passed some kind of test. "That's smart. You're right. But I already talked to your uncle. He told me to bring you if I saw you." Then, after a beat, "Your dad was with him too." He looked really upset. That's when it happened. I didn't plan it. It just came out of my mouth like someone else said it. "My dad's dead." He paused, just a flicker. Then he smiled again, like nothing had changed. Something in my stomach dropped. It was like every instinct I had finally caught up at once. He wasn't who he said he was. He hadn't passed my family. He hadn't come from the trail. I hadn't heard him until he was 5 feet away. He crouched down slowly. "It's okay to be scared. You'll feel better once we're on the road." He reached out again. Then a green Forest Service truck pulled up onto the service road just above us. I don't know how I hadn't seen or heard it coming. The man didn't move at first. Then when the door opened, he stood up quick and stepped back. A ranger got out. Young guy, maybe 25, buzz cut, holding a clipboard and a walkie-talkie. He looked at us. "You two all right?" The man gave a short nod. "She got turned around. I was helping her find her family." The ranger looked right at me. "You with him?" I shook my head. "Is he your dad?" Before I could say anything, the man said yes. The ranger frowned. "That true?" I didn't even think. "My dad is dead." The man didn't speak right away. Then he stepped back. "She's confused. I never said I was her father. I was just trying to help." The ranger stepped between us. "I'll take it from here." The man didn't argue. He didn't even ask for a ride. He just turned and walked off the road, into the trees, not onto a path, just straight into the brush like it wasn't even there. We watched him go. The ranger waited until he was out of sight, then called it in. He didn't act shaken, more annoyed, like the guy had messed up his shift. He handed me a bottle of water, asked if I was hurt, and drove me up the road. Maybe 5 minutes later, we saw Uncle Brian and the boys coming down the trail, shouting my name. The ranger flagged them down. Uncle Brian's face when he saw me was strange, half relieved, half sick. He didn't even yell, just hugged me and held on for a long time. They looked for the man. A few rangers went out that evening, maybe even the next day. No one found him. No name, no vehicle, no boot tracks, just gone. I was 24 when my cousin Devin had picked up this seasonal trail maintenance job up in Miller Ridge, part of the Tabor National Forest area. It wasn't glamorous work, mostly hacking through dense brush, hauling gear, and repairing old water bars. But it paid all right, and it got him out of the city, which he said was the real reason he applied. On weekends, I started tagging along. I wasn't on payroll or anything, but the crew didn't care. I helped haul gear, clear lighter debris, stack branches. I think they just appreciated the extra set of hands. I liked the rhythm of it, the quiet. We'd hike in, work in silence mostly, break for lunch on flat rocks or dusty logs, then hike out. By the end of the day, I'd be wiped, but it was the good kind of tired. Body sore, head clear, kind of like the physical version of turning your phone off and leaving it that way. It was early July, one of those weekends where the heat hits early and doesn't back off until sundown. We were somewhere near Trapper's Loop when I saw him the first time. Just a guy coming up the fire road ahead of us. Thin, wiry, shirtless, carried a skateboard tucked under his arm like it was a totally normal thing to bring into the forest. Behind him were two kids, boys maybe 10 and 6, walking in perfect step behind him, not speaking, not messing around like kids usually do, just trailing him quietly like ducklings. Devin gave him a quick nod when we passed. Trail etiquette. I offered a polite smile. The guy didn't even look at us, not really. His eyes skimmed over like we were trees or rocks. Background noise. Then he kept walking. Weird, sure, but the forest attracts all kinds. Backpackers in full gear, day hikers in sandals, people who swear by crystals or sun cycles. I figured he was just another offbeat hiker who'd taken the wrong fork in the road, except he started showing up again. The next time was on a different trail, Eastview Ridge. We were working a segment that hadn't seen maintenance in a couple seasons, and I looked up to see him sitting on a boulder just uphill from where we were cutting through some overgrowth. Same guy. Still had the skateboard. Still no real expression on his face, like he wasn't interested or bored or anything. Just blank. He didn't say hi, didn't even really look at us, just sat there. Devin noticed too. Huh, he said, wiping sweat off his forehead. Skater Jesus is back. I laughed, but it didn't sit right. A few more weekends passed, and the sightings got weirder. One morning, he was already parked near our crew's staging area before we even got there, leaning against his car, staring off down the canyon. Another time, I passed him heading out as we were hiking in, no kids this time, just walking slowly with his skateboard hanging at his side. He didn't look tired, never did, just out of place, like someone had copied and pasted him into the forest by mistake. And when he did talk, it wasn't normal small talk. He asked oddly specific questions. Is the spring cutoff still flowing? You guys keeping the North Rim closed after the rains? These weren't things most hikers would know or care about. By the third weekend, we were posted up near Wild Brush Saddle, just above one of the old campgrounds. We'd been clearing drainage ditches most of the day, and everyone was tired and cranky. We were packing up when I turned to grab my gloves off a log, and there he was, leaning against a pine tree, maybe 50 feet away, just watching. He didn't look surprised, didn't pretend he was out for a walk or needed directions. He just stood there, one hand resting on the tree like he'd been there a while. Then he raised his hand and gave this slow, almost lazy wave. No smile, no words, like he expected me to wave back automatically. It didn't. That was it for me. I told Devon I wasn't coming back out the next weekend. Didn't give a reason, and he didn't push. Said they'd manage fine without me. I didn't go back into the forest for almost a year. I told my sister something vague. Said there'd been a weird guy on the trail who kept showing up, and I didn't feel comfortable. She pressed a little, asked if he'd followed me to the car. I said no. She asked if he hit on me. I said no again. But the truth was, he kind of did, just not in the way most people think. It was a few weeks before I quit that he actually came into our trail camp. It was a basic little spot near a seasonal stream. Nothing official, just tarps, a couple coolers, some gear laid out while we took a lunch break. That day, everyone else had gone down the trail to fill water jugs. I'd stayed back to reorganize some tools and make sure we didn't leave anything behind. And then he just walked in, no sound, no warning. I looked up and he was standing at the edge of the clearing like he belonged there. Didn't say anything, just walked up slowly and held something out in his hand. It was a trading card, a Magic: The Gathering card actually. I recognized the artwork even though I don't play. some kind of sea monster with huge tentacles rising out of a stormy ocean. He held it out between two fingers, like he was offering me a gift. I didn't touch it, didn't ask what it meant. I grabbed my backpack and walked out of there without a word. I didn't tell anyone that part, not then. It felt too strange to explain. Months passed. Eventually, I picked up a part-time job at the little forest supply kiosk near Brecker Hollow. We sold trail maps, handed out brochures about bear safety, rented canisters, and permits. The vibe was totally different from trail work. Indoors, fluorescent lighting, people asking if they needed sunscreen for a 2-mile loop. I figured I was safe, and then, one weekday afternoon, he walked in, same guy, same frame, same haircut, same eyes that didn't blink enough. No skateboard this time. He used our public computer to print out what looked like a resume, then came up to the counter and said, "How do I get a job here?" My stomach dropped, but I didn't let it show. I kept my voice steady, told him to talk to the manager. She happened to be nearby, and she stepped in, explaining how hiring worked through the regional office. He nodded, smiled slightly, and left. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. 2 years went by. I stopped thinking about him. Then 4 days ago, my mom texted me. Said someone had called the house asking for me. No message, no name, just a number on the caller ID. It didn't look familiar. An hour later, my sister called. She didn't say hello. She said, "You've got a stalker." My stomach turned to ice. She told me the guy had called her too. Said he'd met me in the forest. Said he'd been trying to reach me for a long time. Said he wanted to see me again. He was calm, polite, but something about the way he kept talking freaked her out. He sounded obsessed. That's when things really spiraled. My mom got another call, this time through my brother's phone. She'd been staying at his place that week, and the number came through while she was using his charger. My brother flipped out, accused me of giving out his number, maybe by accident. I swore I hadn't, but somehow this guy had it. I did a reverse lookup. The number traced to a rural area right on the forest's edge near the old ranger station. The kind of place where trailers lean at weird angles and nobody answers the door. My sister and I drove out. She tried to lighten the mood, pointed at every bearded guy and said, "Hey, maybe that's him." I didn't laugh. We didn't get out of the car. When we got home, the calls kept coming. My brother was pissed. Pressed the phone into my hand and said, "You call him right now." So I did. He picked up immediately. "Chesney speaking." I knew the voice. Calm. Way too familiar. I said, "Stop calling this number. This is your final warning. If I hear from you again, I'm calling the police." He tried to explain. Said he just wanted to reconnect. Said I used to be out there all the time, like we were friends, like we had history. I asked for his full name. He gave it, no hesitation. That night, I found his Facebook. It was him. Same face, same vibe, same weird hoodie. His posts were disturbing, chaotic, rants about cleansing rituals, ancestral burdens, and the bloodline of leaders. He claimed German heritage. Said he was descended from Hitler. It didn't feel real. I filed a police report with the local non-emergency line. No direct threats yet, but I wanted it on record. Later that night, he called again, twice. My brother was furious. Handed me the phone. I didn't hold back. "You're done calling this number. You've been reported. One more call, and I get a restraining order." I hung up before he could say anything else. We blocked the number. My mom asked if we should notify the Forest Service. I haven't decided yet, but if he got our numbers from some old employee roster, he might have our address too. That was the year I really got into hiking solo. It started as a way to clear my head before work. Early mornings, cold air, empty trails. Something about moving through nature before the rest of the world was awake made everything else in my life feel manageable. Angeles National Forest became my usual escape. It's close enough to the city to not be a hassle, but once you're a few minutes in, it feels like you've dropped off the map. I'd gotten to know most of the front-facing trails pretty well, enough that I could probably draw them from memory. That morning, I went with one of the shorter loops just off Big Tuhunga. It's a familiar trail, dips through some pine, hugs a ridge, then loops back to the dirt turnout where you park. It's nothing ambitious, just a quick 2-hour out and back with a bit of elevation, the kind of trail you don't need to think about too much. It was still early when I pulled up. The sky was just starting to lighten and the turnout was completely empty. Not another car in sight. I actually liked that. There's a weird peace in being the only one around. No trail runners blowing past, no families trying to coax kids along. Just quiet. I checked my phone. Full bars, full battery. Slipped it into my jacket pocket, water flask went in the side mesh of my pack, pepper spray clipped where I always kept it on the shoulder strap. At that point, my routine was muscle memory. Then I heard the crunch of tires. I was still leaning into my mirror, tightening the laces on my right boot, when a red pickup truck pulled into the lot. I didn't hear it at first, just felt the change in the air. That tension you only notice when you're suddenly not alone anymore. I turned my head just slightly, expecting to see it pull in beside me or roll on past, but it didn't. The truck just stopped and idled. All the way at the far end of the lot. It didn't even angle into a space, just pointed its nose at the tree line like it had somewhere more important to be. The engine stayed on, the driver didn't get out. I looked up and that's when I saw him watching me. He wasn't making any move, just sitting there, hands on the wheel, eyes fixed straight ahead. He wore a black baseball cap pulled low, no sunglasses. His face was blank, not curious, not annoyed, just still. Completely still, like he wasn't actually looking at me, but through me. I gave him one of those half nods you do when you accidentally make eye contact with someone you don't want to talk to. No smile. Then I turned my back and pretended to keep fiddling with my boots, but I felt it. That tightening at the base of your neck when something's not right. When your body picks up on it before your brain wants to believe it. He wasn't moving. No phone out, no map, no reverse lights, just idling, watching. My hand drifted into my jacket and brushed the pepper spray. I didn't unclip it, just needed to feel that it was still there. I told myself maybe he was waiting for someone, maybe he was lost. Maybe his GPS had glitched and was recalculating. I told myself a lot of things. Then I started walking. The trail climbs pretty quickly at first, gradual incline through pine before it opens up into dry brush and exposed rock. I kept a good pace, not rushing, but not dragging either. I didn't put on headphones, didn't make a call, just wanted to keep my ears open. About 10 minutes in, I heard it, that same gravel crunch. But not behind me, from above, higher up toward where the Ranger Access Road branches off the main trail and loops around the ridge. It's technically off limits, chained off with a rusted old "Do Not Enter" sign that's been half collapsed for years. No one really follows it, and you can't get very far before it dead ends. But there he was, same red pickup, crawling along that road like it belonged there. It was slow, deliberate. I watched it glide behind a row of pine trees, then disappear behind a rock outcrop. It didn't reappear. My stomach flipped. That road doesn't loop back. It's a stub, which meant he wasn't heading anywhere. He was positioning himself. That truck had no reason to be up there unless he wanted a clear view down onto the trail. Onto me. That was the moment everything in me changed. I didn't panic exactly. It was more like something cold clicked into place in my brain and everything got sharper. I unclipped the pepper spray, kept it in my right hand. I walked, deliberate steps, no stopping. Just kept moving like nothing was wrong. Then the trail forked. Left would have kept me on the loop, wide and flat, completely exposed. Right dropped into a side trail, more like a deer path than a real hike. It cut steep down into the canyon, narrow and overgrown, but I remembered it from last year. No one used it, and there was no way to follow it with a vehicle. I didn't even think. I turned right. Within a minute, I was under the tree line. Everything got darker, closer. I moved faster, half jogging, staying low without thinking about it. I didn't want to be visible from the ridge. I didn't want him to see me shift direction. Then his engine cut. No sputter, no fade out, just off. 1 second there, then gone. Which meant he wasn't just idling anymore. He was out of the truck. That silence was so loud I could barely think. Then came the branches, braking, steady steps, close, careful. Not an animal, not some squirrel or deer. This was bipedal, heavy, someone picking their way downhill. I dropped behind a thicket of manzanita and crouched low. Didn't move. My fingers were sweating so much I could barely keep a grip on the pepper spray. I didn't breathe, just waited. Then he came into view, between two trees, about 20 feet above me. Same cap, same dark jacket. He was walking slowly, like he had time to kill. Not searching in a frantic way, just scanning. Like someone retracing a path they knew already. He didn't say a word, didn't call out. Just walked with this patience. And then, just like that, he passed. I waited. 10 seconds. Maybe 15. Then I moved, downhill, fast and clumsy. I didn't care about the trail anymore. Slipped on loose rock, scraped my leg on something. Didn't stop. I angled west, trying to get to the fire road I knew crossed the bottom of the canyon. My lungs were on fire. My legs were shaking. But I didn't slow down. I pulled out my phone and hit 911. Tried to talk, but all that came out at first were fragments. Angeles National Big Tuhunga off trail. Someone's following me. Red truck. Don't know the plate. He's on foot. The dispatcher tried to get my GPS. It wasn't working. She asked for trail names, landmarks. I gave her what I could. She said someone was coming. Ranger Patrol. Told me to keep moving if it was safe. I wasn't sure what safe was. Eventually, I found the fire road gate by the highway, crouched behind a boulder. Didn't move until I saw flashing lights come around the bend. It took them 11 minutes to get there. They searched. Nothing. No truck, no man. Just some tire tracks in the dust and one set of boot prints that weren't mine. They asked if I wanted to ride back up to my car. I said no, absolutely not. I didn't want to go back there. Didn't want to see that turnout. Didn't want to even risk that truck being parked off the side somewhere with him inside it. Instead, I drove straight to a gas station, locked my car, sat there for 20 minutes just staring at the dashboard. I called my sister. Then I called my manager. Didn't have it in me to call anyone else. The cops said without a license plate or a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. He hadn't spoken to me. It's been 3 weeks. I haven't hiked alone since. I'm 23, and I left a part of myself in the San Elijo Hills. We met on Hinge last fall. His name on the app was Tyler. Said he was 29. His profile didn't have much to go on, just 2 photos, both clearly cropped to hide where they were taken. One was him hiking, the other at a coffee shop, maybe. No goofy prompts or fun facts like most people include. Just a job title that read tech consultant, and some vague answer about loving the outdoors and meaningful conversation. Still, something about the way he messaged stood out. He was quick, clever, never pushy. Made me laugh in that subtle way where you feel like you're in on the same joke. We matched on a Wednesday night. He asked me out by Friday. Saturday evening, we were sitting outside at a taco stand in Vista, talking about movies and arguing about whether Baja fish tacos are overrated. I thought they were. He pretended to be scandalized. After that, we started seeing each other once or twice a week. Nothing intense. He never called it anything. I didn't either. We hiked together, Double Peak, Iron Mountain, few little trails off the 78, did brunch in places like North Park or Encinitas. He always came to my apartment, never invited me to his. Said he was in between places. I asked once if he had roommates, and he just said kind of and changed the subject. I didn't push it. He always paid in cash. I joked once that he must be a drug dealer, and he just laughed and said, I like keeping things simple. I told myself it was quirky, not suspicious. Looking back, I can see where I started ignoring little things, like how he never used cards, ever, or how his phone was always face down, even when he wasn't looking at it. He never posted anything on Instagram, didn't tag places, didn't even have a visible friends list. I chalked it up to privacy or maybe just being old school. The weird thing was, he made me feel seen, like really seen. He remembered tiny things I mentioned in passing, like the exact book I'd been wanting to read, or that I hated sweet pickles. He made me feel steady, grounded, even when I wasn't. That feeling? It's easy to get hooked on. 2 months in, he told me I made him feel calm, that I was different from people he dated before, less intense, easier to be around. We were on my couch when he said it, his arm around me, like he was letting me in on some secret. I told him I wanted something real, something with actual weight. He got quiet, said his work situation was complicated, and he didn't want to make promises. I said I understood, even though I didn't. He didn't like labels, or plans, or questions, really. I started seeing someone else, not seriously, just a couple of dates. When Tyler found out, he went cold, then heated, not hurt, angry. Like I'd broken a contract I hadn't signed. "You're disrespecting what we've built," he said. I reminded him he told me this wasn't serious, that we weren't exclusive. His face changed, like I'd said something offensive. But then, like always, he came back the next day with a small peace offering, a book I'd offhandedly mentioned weeks earlier, or my favorite ice cream. He never apologized directly, but somehow made me feel like I was the one who needed to make things right. He had this way of shifting the frame, rewriting the rules mid-game without ever acknowledging it. Then came December 3, a Friday. He texted me around 5, "Got a surprise for you. Dress warm, bring a flashlight if you have one." I asked where we were going. "San Elijo, my favorite trail. It's better in the dark." I almost said no. I'd had a long week, I just wanted a glass of wine and to crash early, but part of me thought maybe this was his way of showing effort, of finally letting me into some corner of his life. I said yes. He picked me up at 6:45 in a car I'd never seen before. He said his regular one was getting work done. This one was a beige SUV that smelled faintly like pine air freshener. No personal items inside. The seats were cold. We drove up through San Marcos into the hills. It was already pitch black. The roads narrowed and wound around, like they didn't quite want to be there. When we got to the lot at the trailhead, it was mostly empty, just one other car parked diagonally across, no one inside. He handed me a thermos and a mini flashlight. The cider was warm, a little too sweet. The flashlight was tiny, cheap, and dim. "Battery's low," he said, "but it adds to the atmosphere." We started up the trail. No breeze, no bugs. Even the trees felt like they were waiting. I stayed close behind him, aiming my light low. He talked the whole way, describing how things looked different at night, how it made him focus more on feel than sight. Told me about this one bend in the trail. "It curves like a hook," he said, where he liked to stop and think. About 10 minutes in, he stopped to retie his boot. I told him I needed to pee and stepped off the trail into a patch of tall, brittle scrub. I was maybe 10-15 feet off the path, gone for 90 seconds, max. When I came back, he wasn't there. At first I thought it was a bit. He liked to scare me. Once hid in my closet for 10 minutes just to yell "boo" when I opened the door. I laughed and called out his name. No answer. I walked a little farther down the trail. My flashlight started flickering. I smacked it a few times. Still dim. I called his name again. Nothing. I started to get that tight feeling in my chest. Then my phone buzzed. Venmo notification. Bence, SIS, sent you $2, 0 cents. At first I didn't think anything of it. Maybe a mistake. Maybe Tyler trying to be funny. He'd said he owed me for coffee. But then I stared at the initials. Those weren't his. I clicked on the sender. The profile was empty. 17 friends. No photo. I tapped on one of the mutuals. Their Facebook was public. I scrolled, and there he was. Same eyes, same half smile, but heavier, probably 60 pounds more than I'd ever seen him, standing next to another guy, both of them holding beers. The caption read, "Chilling with Chase Smith at the lake." My stomach dropped. My hands started shaking. I tapped the tag, Chase Smith. I Googled the name, tossed in the city he'd once mentioned during a story. One of the top results was a public directory. Age 29, listed address, a match. Siblings? Same names he'd given me months ago, casually, like they were throwaway details. My flashlight died completely. I turned around and started walking. Then walking faster, then running. I got maybe 20 steps before I saw someone ahead on the trail. He stepped forward into the moonlight. I stopped. "Is your real name Chase Smith?" He didn't look surprised, or scared, or even mad, just still. "No," he said. I took a step back. He stepped closer. "You're jumping to conclusions," he said. "It's not what you think." I said the name again. Louder. He moved fast. Grabbed my wrist. "You're being dramatic. Just listen to me." I tried to pull away, but he held on. His grip wasn't hard, but it was firm, like he wasn't done talking. I screamed, kicked him square in the shin. He let go. I ran. I didn't stop until I saw the gravel of the lot, my car sitting alone under the sodium lights. My hands were trembling as I jammed the key into the lock. I got in, locked the doors, waited. He never followed. I left him in those hills. That night, I blocked everything, numbers, socials, everything I could find. Then I kept digging. My sister helped. She's better at that kind of stuff. We found the Facebook again. Not under Tyler, not under Chase. It was a version of the name, just one letter changed. Just enough to stay hidden. She traced it to a sealed court case, an arrest record. Details redacted, but the dates lined up. 2 years before we met. I never learned what the charges were. He never told me the truth about anything. I don't know why he brought me out there, maybe just to scare me, maybe to see what I'd do. But when I think back to that moment when he stepped out of the trees, I remember how calm he looked.